I think we're learning from our service providers that there are a finite number of problems and an infinite number of solutions. So it's been a long day of discussing and learning on various topics. The question is, so where do we go from here? What comes next? And as one of the last parts to this RFF, I'd like to hand it over to a very thoughtful leader, someone who not only holds official positions at the G7 and presently at the G20, but also has dedicated her career to inclusion. So I'd like to welcome Payal, Dalal, who is accompanied by Magda, Chanchal, Luiz, Gustavo, and Michael to the stage, please. Let's give them a warm welcome.
Okay, fantastic. Please, I'm going to have Chanchal sit here since he has to leave. Okay. Perfect. Terrific. Please have a seat, and please welcome our fabulous panelists. On my right, we have Chanchal from the Government of India. We have Michael from Accion, Magda from Bank of Italy, and Luiz from the Central Bank of Brazil. And let me assure you that we are saving the best for last when it comes to conversations at the Responsible Finance Forum. Our goal in this 45-minute panel is to give you plenty of fodder to talk about during the cocktail hour that is directly following this session. So I hope you are all anticipating a highly entertaining, potentially controversial, and maybe even surprising panel discussion. And I'd say the theme of this panel discussion is both a little bit of navel-gazing, but also a little bit of stargazing, specifically North Star gazing. And I want to start with you, Chanchal. And Chanchal has to leave for a flight in a few minutes, so he gets the opportunity of dropping a few truth bombs at us, and then leaving and not seeing what impact it has. So Chanchal, I want you to start by telling us, you've spent the whole day with us today. What topics and what insights have excited and energized you, and what is going to keep you up at night tonight?
Thank you very much for inviting me, the RFF and the Brazilian presidency. We thoroughly enjoyed, and thank you very much for asking a simple question to me. We enjoyed this forum very much. I have seen a wide range of comments and discussions, very high quality discussions. We have seen what are the emerging technologies, how DPIs are important, how responsible way we need to think from both supply side as well as demand side. That is very important. And also we have seen how the experience across the globe that in such a platform has been incredibly rich. So thank you very much, and I am taking all of this. So when I see that there are this kind of, that the last session, let me take the example of the last session, where there is in Latin America, there is a survey. So there is around 76 or 60, I'm very bad in remembering numbers. They say that the scalability is an issue. So now the whole world is facing enormous challenge, like 1.4 billion totally outside of this financial system, then 2 billion, as you're saying, out. So therefore, we need to be more responsible. That is the thing. And then how we can be more responsible, we can have DPI that has innovative solution that is by definition interoperable, scalable, and more responsive and responsible. So with these, I see that a lot of discussions in right directions. We also are trying to understand what are the intricacies of DPIs. That is really hugely energizing for me, and I would go to my office every day from tomorrow or day after tomorrow onwards, thinking responsible, financial inclusion, thinking more of DPI elements into it. Thank you.
Terrific. So you're energized by the scalability of digital public infrastructure. I'm not going to let you off the hook. What's going to keep you up tonight in terms of worries, or maybe something that we don't know yet, but we really need to start to figure out the answer on when it comes to responsible finance?
Yeah, basically, we need to have, 1.4 billion still outside. Bringing them into the formal system itself is responsible. So we must try to do that. And at the same time, like as it was saying, that access is not the ultimate goal. We need to enhance the usage also. Now, which way we can use? There are two sections broadly. One that by choice they do not use, and other that they cannot use. So now, what is it that brings us on the table that we can solve both the problems in an innovative way, because it has been so many years that we couldn't solve these problems. We need to think beyond the traditional way. We need to think innovative way, and we need to produce results. I'm so happy to see that across the world, new initiatives are there, fintechs are there, and this is a reality. If we need to accept that. If we fail to accommodate and take the benefit of it, the new technologies, then we will remain on the back seat.
Those are also some of my nightmares in terms of reaching that last mile, but also how do we go beyond access and really drive usage, but also maintain trust. Before we let you go onto your flight, I have one final question for you that has two parts. One is, we've got a fantastic audience of practitioners, policymakers, consumer advocates. What would your call to action be for them in terms of driving forward the responsible finance agenda? And the second part of my question is, what are you going to commit to so that when we reconvene in South Africa in a year's time, we will ask you about?
I thought you will not ask me questions because I said you have asked me good questions. So, okay. So you said that what would be my additional effort for these policymakers? See, that I would definitely encourage such exchange of information. We would also need to come and share our experiences. We need to also contribute to the capacity buildings, not only within this particular group or even G20, since I come from the G20 co-chair. So fortunately, our group allows us to work for beyond G20. We must remain and collaborate and share experiences, and will encourage such events. That would be my take. And second thing, that during South African presidency, we actually have a very well-defined process within G20. So by following that process, myself and my co-chair, Magda, so we will coordinate and work with the South African presidency, like we are doing with the Brazilian presidency with Luiz, Ronaldo and team. And we have a job at hand that we need to complete this job, what we have been given, the financial inclusion action plan, under which that there is a action plan for SME finance that we will conclude, and we'll see that how we can become more responsible while taking initiatives on the efforts of financial inclusion. So we'll continue to do so even in the South African presidency.
Amazing. Collaboration, community building, and really supporting the next presidency in building on the fantastic work both in India and in Brazil. Thank you very much. We wish you safe travels, and we will be checking how you're doing on your commitments in a year's time. Thank you, Chanchal.
Thank you very much, and my apologies that I need to go back. Thank you.
Thank you. So now the rest of the panel's on the hook. They've had the enjoyable experience of getting to listen and watch Chanchal be on the firing line. Before we put them under some scrutiny and give them some hard questions, we're going to start with an audience poll, again, in the spirit of trying to do some navel gazing. And we want to know what your biggest takeaway from today's discussion is. So if you can get out your trusty smartphone, scan that QR code, and select from your choices. We have safeguards of DPI, user-centric DPI, financial health, the list goes on. So tell us what your biggest takeaway or maybe your aha moment is from today. We're seeing really great responses trickle in. I see about 50 people have put in. Collaboration seems to be a really large theme. We're seeing user centricity, we're seeing trust, we're seeing over-regulation, we're seeing need more data, we're seeing accountability, cross-sector, impact, more investors. Luiz, I'm gonna turn to you. You've seen the audience answers and they're still popping up, which is terrific. I love the level of engagement. What resonates with you from what you see on the screen, and how does it resonate with what the Brazilian presidency is doing? And also, if you could give us a preview into some of the things you'll be doing in the next few months that we can get involved in.
Well, thank you. First, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting the Central Bank of Brazil to the stage, and also congratulate the RFF for the nice forum and debate, really enriching our discussions. So listening to the debates and all the discussions about the digital products and services we were discussing today, for me the key takeaway from this debate is that we need to put consumer at the center of our actions. So we need to think, design, and implement our policies and design our initiatives and products, both as regulators and financial service providers, aiming for the best outcome for the consumer. As an example, the most successful product from Brazil, from the Central Bank of Brazil in the last decade, Pix, that we heard here a lot about Pix, was designed having a consumer at the center of its objectives. So it's consumers love Pix because it's a hassle-free experience. It's simple, easy to use, and it's cost-free. This is one example. And consumer centricity is at the core of our presidency priority. Brazil also thought that it was about time for the G20 to put consumer at the center of the discussions. So when we design financial inclusion policies, we need to design them thinking at the best outcome for consumers, having in mind that sometimes not only providing access and usage will be enough to improve their lives. So we need to bear in mind every time we are thinking about our financial inclusion policies, are consumers better off, or are they worse off? And can we measure it? How can we measure it? So this was the whole purpose for Brazil to choose financial well-being as our president's priority for 2024. So the GPFI has been working on a report that will include a working definition of financial well-being, but also a proposal for measuring financial well-being, because someone very important, I don't know who, said that if you cannot measure it, you cannot improve it or manage it. And only by knowing where we are, we can, decide where to go and improve our policies. In terms of work for the next months, this debate started in January. It will continue in the next months. Measuring outcome is, I would say, is the next phase of this report. And also, I would like to finalize saying that, highlighting how the process of debating in spaces like the GPFI, in forums like the GPFI, in this forum here is important, because in the GPFI, we have a wide range of economies, different levels of development in countries. We have also international institutions. Here, we saw at the beginning when people raise up, different stakeholders. So it's a very complete debate with a wide range of views, and it's very, very useful to incorporate, and we can always learn from listening from different perspectives. As the current presidents of the GPFI, we are very excited with this work, and we are sure that our priority and this report on financial well-being will be a legacy of the GPI for the coming years. And we are also very glad to see that the debates that we held here are very aligned with the discussions that we are having at the GPFI. So that's it. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you very much for that summation and also what to expect. Magda, I'm going to come to you. The GPFI just finalized the Financial Inclusion Action Plan for 2024 to 2026. Can you, one, give us some of the highlights, but two, tell us a little bit about how this community can help drive that action plan forward?
So first, thanks a lot to everybody. It was really, really amazing this day. And it is amazing both in my role as working in a central bank on consumer protection and financial education, but also as GPFI co-chair. And I will say something about this. Maybe a few words about our processes, how GPFI works, because I think it helps in understanding how we can work together somehow. We have in our action plan, which lasts 3 years, as you were saying, we have action areas that we are going to work on. And for the next 3 years, this one and the next two, we have 2 action areas, which are digital financial inclusion for everybody, individuals, households, and everybody, and MSMEs financing, as I think also Chanchal mentioned. Now, how do we perform? How do we address this action plan? Through policy analysis, recommendations, sharing of experiences. We have then to monitor progresses among our membership and beyond, and facilitate coordination among members and global bodies to support specific global financial inclusion efforts, foster capacity building and technical assistance. Now, I think this helps explaining how we work in a sense. Our final objective as GPFI, but I think as everybody here, is in a sense meaningful financial inclusion for individuals and MSMEs, as I was saying. A financial inclusion that matters, that produces well-being, that reduces inequality and poverty. In our work over the years as GPFI, we have learned a lot. Specifically, we have learned, and we are now trying to address this, we really need first to include all, and we heard that we really need to address the last mile, but we also have to take care of the impact of digital inclusion, about which we heard really, really a lot, making sure that it doesn't make someone worse off in just accessing, making everybody access the digital world. So how do we do that? Well, a set of areas of policies which are governing innovation in a very general sense, that is making sure that innovation that we think in general is good for everybody, doesn't just favor someone, doesn't create concentration of power, but really produce shared benefits. And more specifically, going more and more specific, we need to create secure infrastructures. We heard a lot about digital public infrastructure this morning. We have to ensure very strong consumer protection, which needs to evolve continuously to address incoming problems, very difficult, different ones, and sometimes hard to address. And also the other leg is financial education. We didn't speak a lot about this, but we really think this is another pillar that is very important. It doesn't have to have too much weight, meaning that we don't have to put all the weight on the consumers in getting informed, in getting educated, but it has to work together with consumer protection and the other pillars. Well, in this path, in this general framework, what are we going to do in these years? This year, well, first of all, under Brazil, we have a presidency priority, which is financial well-being, developing a framework to understand what is financial well-being, defining in a shared way, in a way that is recognized by all stakeholders, and finding a metric to measure it. Why? Because we really need to get to the impact of financial inclusion, make sure that, as I said, it matters. We have two other areas we are working. The first is addressing last mile, exactly. How? Trying to understand what's behind it. What are the reasons 1.4 billion of population doesn't access financial services? Is it because of infrastructures, digital IDs, and so on, but also demand side and supply side issues? And we are working on with our implementing partners on this. But in parallel way, we are also working on quality financial inclusion. The idea being that we cannot reach those who are excluded in a way that we already know from our experience might not be the right one, might produce also negative results. So we want to work in parallel, and there we are working on a shared framework. We don't still have a framework of what it means really, quality inclusion. We understand what isn't quality inclusion. What are we heard today about some negative impact of access without thinking about quality, but we need to address that in a meaningful sense, again, finding metrics to measure it. And then the third area is MSMEs, addressing MSMEs financing gap. And again, we are trying to work as for the last mile, what's behind it? What are the reasons? What are the, as we economists say, what are the market failures behind micro and small enterprises' difficulties in accessing finance, and how digitalization can address it? Again, being careful that we don't end up in bad equilibria. Then we have plans for the next future, but those are more general. We want to work in the next year about the impact of innovation, of technology on, again, digital financial inclusion, but we will define better our plans together with the next presidency towards the end of this year. And in this path, there are obviously a lot of space for cooperation, more formal. We have our implementing partners, but also many more informal collaboration as this one, and as, you know, people or organizations coming to our meeting and we going to other meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Magda. Very robust, exciting, and very challenging agenda ahead. So please lean on all of us to help you achieve that agenda. Michael, I'm going to turn to you. Accion and CFI are really important drivers in the inclusive finance space, and I want you to kick off our North Star gazing, if you will. Tell us where you think Responsible Finance Forum should be headed and what it should prioritize going forward to really drive impact and help complement the GPFI agenda we just heard.
So I'm struck by, I have a few thoughts. First, this morning, in my own mind, and in my opening remarks, I was framing things in terms of how do we leverage digital technology to help bring billions of people into the financial system? How do we maximize the benefits and minimize the harm? I'm struck by, we were all in India last year, we're in Brazil this year. I would argue that those are the two best regulators in financial, if they're not the two best, they're certainly right up there among the best regulators for financial inclusion. And they're also two countries that are having spectacular innovation. And I think those two things are related. There's sort of the famous line of the brakes on a car allow you to go fast. One worry, and I think one of the answers to your question is, I worry about many, many markets that don't have the quality of regulators that India and Brazil have. I do think GPFI and I think RFF can help share ideas to make that more even. I also, one other thing, 1.4 billion people are excluded. I talk about 2 billion because I think there's hundreds of millions of people who are poorly served and inadequately served, and they have dormant accounts. And so I focus more on the 2 billion because it's also about quality, not just access. I worry about the next billion. It's going to be harder to reach than the last billion. And look, I think RFF, I think this today was extraordinary. I'm happy to go on about that. But I think we didn't talk enough about agriculture. We didn't talk about the smallholder farmer. 2/3 of those 2 billion people are smallholder farmers. And the technologies and the protections they need are a little bit different. So I would try to broaden that conversation a little bit. I do think in these countries that are having extraordinary innovation, it's really hard for the regulators to keep up, even when you have such a high quality regulator like the RBI and the Central Bank of Brazil. So I worry about the imbalance. The pace of change is just moving. It's like a rocket ship and you're hearing it all day. It's not easy for regulators. Regulators are usually stretched too thin. They're usually under-resourced. You know, it's miraculous. I was stunned by how the PIC staff is so small. That's amazing. Most regulators with a small staff don't accomplish what CBC Central Bank of Brazil has accomplished. I don't know if I've answered your question. I've just sort of talked about like what I'm worried about.
No, you have, because I think ultimately what it boils down to, Michael, is that we're building a community. And we're building a community to build capacity and sharing best practices, but also sharing some of those failures and also just sharing the questions we have, because there are more questions than answers. And we need to share that burden. So I think you absolutely answered that. I'm going to stay with you, Michael.
Yes.
I'm just reflecting on the ambitious agenda Magda and Chanchal laid out. It's clear that one sector alone isn't going to be able to deliver and deliver successfully. Talk me through the role of the private sector. It's not really been talked about a lot today. What is your view of the role of private sector in all of this? And Luiz, fair warning, I'm going to ask you next.
I share your view, and I think that's in part because we're adjacent to GPFI, and so it's a very regulatory mindset, and appropriately so. I think the private sector, look, we're trying to create a financially inclusive world. If you had all the philanthropy in the world, it would be insufficient. The only way we're going to get there is to harness the private sector, harness the capital markets, and so we need to think through regulation that encourages competition and innovation and inclusion and responsible financial inclusion. I think the role of the private sector is enormously important. And again, I'm sort of struck by India and Brazil in creating rules, sparking innovation, but really empowering the private sector to innovate. I think that is the path forward.
We call that commercially sustainable social impact. So let's
quote
see
you
more
on
of that. Let's see more of that. Luiz, from your perspective, what's the role of private sector in taking forward responsible finance and indeed complementing a lot of the objectives the central bank and GPFI are putting forward?
Well, first, I think you asked the right person the question, I mean, the right regulator to talk about this, because at the central bank, we think that a multi-stakeholder approach and involving the private sector is crucial if you want to take on initiatives that demand large scale, distribution to a country that is continental like Brazil and have an immense population. So, I mean, for us, this is crucial. But I must say that there is skepticism when we talk about involving the financial sector, partnering with the government, especially the central bank. There is a lot of skepticism, and the Central Bank of Brazil has received some backlash on this when we talk about our experiences. But I'm going to share with you. I have 3 experiences that we consider them very successful, and they are successful because we partner with the private sector. The first one is obviously PICs. right? A strong case of the power of multi-stakeholder initiatives involving the central bank, traditional banks, and payment institutions. The second one is our work of calling upon financial institutions on their responsibility to promote and deliver financial education to their customers. This initiative started in 2019 with a simple non-regulatory communication to the financial system, setting principles for their financial education initiatives and establishing also procedural mechanisms for the central bank to support and monitor those initiatives. Since 2019, the initiative has been very successful with a lot of progress and engagement from the financial sector in delivering and providing financial education to their clients. And last year, perhaps we are the first central bank in the world who has a regulation issued that make it mandatory for financial institutions to provide financial education to their clients. And finally, the third one that I would like to share with you is related to measuring outcomes. In 2020, the Central Bank of Brazil partnered with our National Bank Association to develop our Brazilian Financial Health Index. And the surveys and the data collected through this, for this initiative has already contributed to different public policies that we have implemented, including in the Central Bank of Brazil. We are happy, we are more happy that we can carry everything that we learned developing this financial index with the private sector inside our work in the GPFI presidency. So.
Fantastic, Luiz. Thank you very much. And your last point on measurement tees up the question I have for Magda. It's almost like we planned it, Luiz. It's amazing. Magda, tell us, how are we going to measure all of this? And it's the easiest question I'm giving you. How are we going to measure this, and what are we going to measure? You know, I was just at the CGAP meetings in London a few weeks ago, and we're all talking about outcomes coming from financial inclusion. So how do we understand the impact of financial inclusion on poverty, on women's economic empowerment, on education and health outcomes? Tell us, what's the answer?
Very easy. Of course. Very easy question. Well, it's really difficult, of course. And we all know that when we speak about regulation, especially consumer protection, it's very difficult to do impact assessment, to evaluate these policies, to make sure that actually they matter. I think the effort we are doing this year goes precisely in this direction. In order to measure outcomes like this, we need first to identify a metric, some measure that is really measuring what we mean. So in order to make sure that we are meaningful, that we are impactful, we need to understand what is the outcome that we are measuring. Well, I think the ultimate outcome that we all aim to is really financial well-being. So the effort this year will be to try and define it and try to find reasonable measures for it. And we know it's a very difficult effort, and it will probably have to be, in a sense, iterative. That is, let's try with a definition. Let's identify some possible measurement. Let's try, maybe pilot some measurement, and then see whether it works, whether actually it was a good definition, and maybe we will have to adjust more times. But I think we are in the right direction. The other thing is, in a sense, a step before, that is measuring quality inclusion, which should be, in a sense, an input to well-being. And again, that's a very difficult task because it means, in a sense, measuring also policies that we are putting in place. That is measuring which policies we have, which kind of consumer protection policies we have. I don't know whether we have redress mechanisms, how effective our supervision, conduct supervision policies are, and their metrics are very difficult, but we are thinking about that. So I cannot say much more because we are really trying to develop them, but we are into this. And I think this is essential for all of us, for the work of all of us, really.
Can I just add on impact and measurement? CGAP is working on a very ambitious project called FI 2.0, and not a surprise, the Central Bank of Brazil is at that table. And think about, this is my description of it, which may be different than the way CGAP would describe it, but PIX is a database that now has a third of all of the transactions in Brazil. It's a database we've never had before, and we have artificial intelligence, we have the capacity to understand and see patterns in that data. Isn't it time to rethink, and I think this is what CGAP is trying to do, rethink how we think about impact. In that database, you can see if you disperse a loan, if you make an insurance payment, if someone increases their savings, and then they also start spending more money on education or on food or on health, we should be able to see correlations, maybe not causality, but correlations that we've never been able to see before. I think that is not only very, very exciting, but also can really guide us. We can start to, hopefully, we'll be able to see what works in terms of impact. So I'm very excited by that.
Yeah, we need to do that. So it's very helpful that we have now a large amount of data. We need, in a sense, to govern them, because that's what I was saying before. We need a framework, because we know that, for example, financial well-being is affected by so many factors that if we think that the results that we find depend only on financial inclusion, we might make a lot of mistakes. So we need to have a framework to be able to use this huge amount of data and account properly for the role of financial inclusion. But we are there. I think the path is there, the journey is there.
It's all very exciting, and it was just getting really, really good, and I'm being told we only have 5 minutes left. So I'm gonna ask you, in 1 minute each, Chanchal was your exemplar. Tell me, one, what your call to action is for this audience, and two, what your commitment is to this audience that we hold you accountable. Michael, I'm gonna have you start first.
So I have to say, and again, I had this feeling at the end of last year, and again, this is an incredible and very, very special community. It's an intimate group, and yet it's thought leaders from around the world. I think the high quality of the whole day today has been amazing, and I think the call to action is to keep this conversation going, so it's not just a once-a-year event, but really the workshops and the dialogue that happens between these meetings is enormous. And if you ask me my personal call to action, I'm going to do everything I can to support Jayshree and Natasha and Eduardo and CFI to keep the RFF community vibrant, and because I think this is the group that's going to figure it out.
Fabulous. Magda.
Well, somehow the same, meaning I think we are all committed to responsible or inclusive or meaningful finance inclusion. I think we should all keep on performing our respective roles. We've heard of many. Private innovators, technology innovators, private sector, financiers, regulators, supervisor. Each of us should keep focusing on this objective, but maybe accepting to being contaminated by the dialogue among all of us, because I think we will perform better our role. I think in my case, I learned a lot of things today, and I can think of how doing better even my job of protecting consumer or doing financial education. And my commitment is doing that, exactly. So.
Fantastic. Luiz.
Well, I think that the name of the forum summarizes what I think is a call to action. We need to implement responsible finance. And in terms of commitment, Brazil is committed up to the head with this. We brought financial well-being and quality to the discussion at the GPFI. We didn't need to do that. It's been challenging. The discussions are heated, but we are committed to deliver the report, the metrics, and so because we truly believe on this. And our experience with financial inclusion, I think I have said that here at the beginning of the forum, showed that if you don't focus on quality and if you don't focus on the outcome to the citizen, if you don't focus on financial well-being, financial inclusion can be a mess. So let's do responsible finance.
It falls to me to summarize this fantastic discussion. I'm going to try to do it in an alliteration and just focus on words beginning with C. So, I've heard a lot about community, heard a lot about collaboration. As we're stargazing and North Star gazing, credit for small business, customer centricity, consumer protection, consumer outcome led, co-innovating, capacity building for regulators. And I love the word that you use, Magda, contamination. How do we contaminate each other and really cross-pollinate learnings and the things that, that excite us, energize us in those use cases? I am delighted to invite you to another set of C's, caipirinhas, cachaças, and cocktails, which follow this session. But please join me in thanking our fantastic panelists, Michael, Magda, and Luiz.